Look at this little beauty, the Canon AE-1 Program, a timeless classic camera from the early 1980s that was suitable for anyone that wanted to shoot SLR cameras without all the fuss of knowing about photography, shutter speeds, apertures, metering, etc. This thing did it all for them, and in their hands was a professional looking camera at the time. So this camera isn't mine, it was donated to the local Rotary Club, which is a charity, by someone. And the Rotary Club contacted me and asked me to check it out. They're only in the local area, so they knew about me. And they said, would you mind checking the camera out, make sure it works, and also give them a rough idea of how much these go for. So that's why I've got this camera. I'm just checking it over, making sure that the light meter's working okay, shooting it, seeing that the light seals are okay, and also the shutter speeds are working as well. Unfortunately, it didn't come with any Canon lenses. I've put a 50mm Canon lens, FD lens, on this camera for this shoot, but it did come with an array of other different lenses, which I'll show you a little bit later on. But let's get on and shoot this camera and see how it performs. So this camera's got 3 different functions. It's a shutter priority camera, which means you choose the shutter speed that you want, and the camera will choose the correct aperture on the lens to expose your scene, whatever it thinks is going to make the nicest exposure. And it's also fully automatic as well, which is what the program mode is for, and what that was all about back in the day. You could put the lens into auto mode, and you can put the dial into program mode, and then it becomes a fully automatic camera. All you've got to do is point, focus, and press the button, and the camera will work out all the exposures for you. Or you can completely override that and go manual, so you can choose your aperture and you can choose your shutter speed and get a little bit more creative. But I can imagine back in the day this was really handy for anyone wanting to get into photography. They could learn the basics of an SLR, changing lenses and stuff, without worrying about exposures. And if you wanted to learn a little bit more about metering and exposing, you can turn it fully manual. On the front of the camera here, we've got auto exposure lock, and also this top button's auto exposure lock, and this one here is you can press that and you can see instantly inside what the metering is on your scene. You've got your flash sync. This little button here is for, if I put that lens back into manual mode, that is for your depth of field preview. So I can push that in and lock it, and I can see what my depth of field is going to look like. And over this side, we've got this little tiny grip as well, which I believe was an accessory at the time, and underneath there is where the battery goes. Flip the camera around, you've got this little tiny sprocket there, which should have a cap on it. The cap's missing, but that is for a auto winder, which I've got for this as well. There's your film speed control there, so you've got 3200 all the way, 3200 all the way to ISO 12, so whatever film is inside your camera. I'm going to be shooting this 400 speed film, so I'll be setting this to 400. And if we look at the back, open up, see the guts of the camera. Inside there is a electromagnetic controlled cloth shutter curtain, and the camera is not without its famous Canon cough. Let's have a listen to that. There we go. Hey. On the side, you've got these little switches here. A is for on, that is for off or lock, and then you click it over to S for the self timer, which is about 20 seconds. You can hear it going off there. And over this side is another button where you can cancel that timer, and that also acts as a battery check as well. It sounds a bit strange, this one. And that's pretty much it. It's a real basic camera, but back in the day this thing was legendary. A lot of amateurs loved using this because they didn't have to think about, too much about taking their shots. They could get a nice camera like this that looked the business, and they could go out and get photographs even if the whole thing was on auto mode. They can come back with decent photographs. So I'm down at the farm, and inside the camera I've got a roll of Agfa APX, which is expired by about 10 years. It works fine, so I'm going to be using that for this camera, for this shoot today down the farm. I want to be checking the camera over for the Rotary Club, so I'm going to check all the modes. I've already checked the metering, and as far as I can see, it's out by about a stop. So I've got a 400 speed film inside this camera, and it's overexposing by a stop. So what I want to do is just set the ASA dial to 800. So I'm going to tell the camera that there's an 800 film inside. So I'm going to take a few shots around the farm first in fully auto mode, so pretty much point and shoot. All I've got to do is focus and take my shot. And this old tractor in the background. Right, fully auto mode. Yeah. Let's get that old tractor in the background. It's giving me an aperture of f4, And the thing is, it doesn't tell me what shutter speed it's shooting, but what it does do is warn me if my shutter speeds go below 1/30th of a second. A little bit like the Yashica Electro 35 camera, that used to give you a little indication that you was on a slower shutter. I'm going to take those two photographs again at change the ASA back to 400, what the film speed is. So those shots were on fully auto, so the camera was choosing the shutter speed for me and the aperture. I'm now going to switch it into shutter priority mode. So I'm going to choose the shutter speed and then let the camera decide what aperture. Could you hear that? I don't know if you heard that. This camera's got that Canon cough. It kind of makes a squeak when you press the shutter. Still works fine as far as I know. Just need to take the bottom plate off and give it a little tiny bit of oil in, but I'm not going to do that. It's not my camera to open up. But there's one thing that gripes me with this camera is when I'm shooting in fully auto or program mode as they call it, it's not telling me what shutter speed I'm at. It will just warn me if I'm below 1/30th. I suppose if I want to know what shutter it's giving me, I can go into, take it off program, go into shutter priority and see where I am at 5.6. It says here 2/50th of a second, so I'll go back into auto mode and shoot that 5.6. I know that it's at 2/50th of a second. So inside the bag was this camera and the Avenir 28mm lens. It also came with a instruction manual, original instruction manual. A Vivitar 28-105 lens. There's also a Canon A winder or Canon Power Winder A there as well that comes with it. That goes there. We've got a Tamron 80-210mm lens there. We've got a bunch of extension tubes in case you like doing macro photography. There's a little tiny cable release as well. There's a spare battery. We've got an old classic camera strap, and it all comes in this nice cozy camera bag, which everything was inside there. I want to try this 28mm lens that it came with. And Canon have got this on these FD lenses, this breech lock system. So you put it on, you twist it and lock it in place. That's how you change the lenses on these cameras. Quite quick to do. So I'm not going to mess around with shutter priority anymore. I'm going to use this camera nice and easy, nice and quick in auto mode. So I'm going to set the lens to auto and the dial at the top to program. That will give me fully automatic. All I've got to do is point the camera in the right direction, focus and press the button. I do love a 28mm lens. Don't know what shutter speed that was. Carl, could you imagine coming around here and shooting some Ektachrome or some colour slide film, all these yellows and blues and reds? In fact, I just realised I left the camera halfway through on 400. When I changed it to 400, I forgot to change it back to 800. So it's quite a joy to use. It's nice and heavy, it feels quality, feels solid. And what we're looking at, 40 odd years since this camera was manufactured, and it still works. That's amazing, you know? I think it is anyway. All that clockwork stuff, it still works. I doubt if it's been serviced. It's probably been sitting in this bag for God knows how many years. And I'm sure whoever picks this camera up when it gets sold for the Rotary Club, for the charity, are going to be very happy with it. I'm just not too sure about the exposures and if that meter is working inside properly. But crikey, I've got loads of SLR cameras that have got dodgy meters inside. So the way that I test these old cameras' light meters is I always use my Sekonic light meter, which works. Also use a Nikon FM3A, and I use my digital Canon DSLR as well. So if that camera can match these cameras' metering system on this background behind me, if it matches the same metering, then I'm happy. But I've already tested it and I know that it's not. And I'm in a room where there's no daylight coming in, so if you're going to do this sort of test, I wouldn't do it against window light, because outside the light's changing all the time. Even though you think it's flat, you'll be surprised how quickly it changes. So I do it inside a room where there's no influence from outside coming in. And I've also calibrated my Astrori little handy light meter to these cameras as well, so I'm going to use this too. So I've got the AE-1 set to 1/30th of a second, 400 film speed, and it should put it on auto, and it's given me f5.6. So this is f5.6. So first thing I do is use my light meter. I'm not going to point it directly towards the lens. I'm just going to point it down, because there's light bouncing off the ceiling. That's going to hit the dome and give me a weird reading. 5.64. Okay, I'm happy with that. And I'll do the same now with my DSLR. Set it to the right focal length of 50mm. And that's given me f6.3. On top of this camera, I've got a little Astrori light meter. That is also giving me 6.3. And finally, the Nikon FM3A is also giving me 5.6.5 at 1/30th. And those light meters, such as the Sekonic and the DSLR, and also the Astrori, are in third of a stops. The Nikon FM3A goes in half stops. So what I did with this one, I just went between f5.6 and f8, and that's when I got my 1/30th of a second. So it's all much of a muchness, but I can be safe to say that that camera is probably about half a stop or a stop out, and that proved it in the photographs that I took. When I put it to 400 when I was shooting, I started to get overexposure on the negatives. So that's how I check the light meters on these old cameras to see if they work. And it's best to, really, because if you're going to go out blind and you're going to trust the camera's light meter inside and start shooting away, you might be disappointed at the end when you've got underexposed or overexposed negatives, as I showed you earlier on. But other parts of this camera, such as the shutter speeds, that's quite easy to test. When I came back, I shot the rest of that roll against a plain wall, and I went through all the shutter speeds, starting at 1/60th of a second, which was the metered speed, and then I went through all the speeds, taking a photograph each time. And as I did that, I'd then be able to see the negatives. I'll show you those, how they came out. You can see a complete step wedge on the negatives from its slowest speed of 2 seconds to its fastest speed of 1/1000th of a second. So I'm pretty happy that these shutter speeds are working well. Obviously there's machinery that you could use. It's quite expensive to test them bang on, but for me, for my work, these seem to be working fine. Also light seals as well. I know there's no light leaks because I've been out and I've tested it. I put a roll of film in the camera, so if you want to check a camera for light leaks, go out in the sun and shoot it, and leave it on one frame as well, and just wave it around in the sun. When you come back and develop, if you've got light leaks, you need to replace the seals. If not, happy days, you can carry on shooting. And seals aren't really hard to replace anyway. So if you're in a charity shop and you're looking at the light seals in one of these sort of cameras, they should look nice and spongy all the way around, or got some good depth. If they're falling apart, especially the light seal on the door, that might be a little tiny bit, you know, flat, or maybe bits of it are falling off. Don't let it swerve you, because light seals are easy to replace. And the lenses as well, just make sure there's no fungus on the lenses, as I have done these. There's no fungus on these lenses. They all look pretty clean for their age. And the battery compartment as well. If a camera like this one runs on batteries, this doesn't work without batteries. But just have a look inside the battery compartment and make sure that there's no corrosion, or the battery isn't stuck in there and all gooed up, because that might end up making the camera not work. So always have a look at the battery compartment and see what state that's in. This one's really clean. But other than that, it's a really clean camera to shoot, and a fun camera as well. I'm not sure if I'm quite happy with shutter priority. I must admit, I prefer aperture priority if I'm going to go and shoot something, and let the camera decide what shutter speed I'm shooting, or fully manual. But shutter priority, I wasn't too comfortable with it. But I can imagine, like I said, back in the day when people wanted to get this sort of camera, I should imagine it was quite exciting for those hobbyists or amateurs that could come away from point and shoot and have a bit more control with the camera, and put it in fully auto as well if they wanted to, knowing that they're going to get decent exposures. If they wanted to go into manual mode and start learning a little bit about light and exposure, they could do with this camera. So I should imagine back in the day this was an exciting camera when it came out, especially with all its fully auto modes. But there is a camera, the the Canon AE-1. Apparently that's meant to have been a beast, and a lot of people like that. I did put a community post out and ask you guys about the Canon AE-1 program and what you think. Have a jump on there, because there's a lot of interesting comments from people with experience with these cameras. Some love them, some hate them, and a lot of people are talking about the Canon AE-1 and the AE-1 as well. Anyway guys, hope you enjoyed the video. Watch out for this on my Instagram page in the coming weeks, and I'll catch you next time. So this camera isn't mine, it was given... So this camera isn't mine, it was given to the local Rotary Club, which is a charity. So this camera isn't mine, it was given to the local...